much. You're allowing me to participate today in the hearing, and want to thank our witnesses for being here and for sharing their thoughts. I think we were all delighted after working on it for about 3 years that the Tribal Law and Order Act passed finally last year, and the conditions on many of our nation's reservations, including in our home state of South Dakota, are not acceptable. And the enactment of the Tribal Law and Order Act isn't going to be a silver bullet in solving all those problems, but I do believe it was an important step in the right direction in improving public safety and justice. And so I'm very interested in your reaction, obviously, and getting an assessment a year later about how some of these things are working. Mr. Echo Hawk, if I might direct this question to you, I want to commend your Deputy Director Darren Cruzan for all the hard work at the Office of Justice Services and the things that have been done in the area of law enforcement and correction officer hiring, because one of the issues that we've been identifying is getting people trained through the process, getting them out on the reservations. And I think the common sense idea of holding job fairs has been very well received by the 9 tribes in South Dakota. Seems to be hiring up or speeding up the hiring process. But my understanding is that there's still a bottleneck in hiring when it comes to the applicant getting to the background check stage. And so I'm wondering if you could explain that background check process from the time the applicant's given the paperwork for the background check until that individual is fully hired.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Thune, I'm of course not the expert when it comes down to actually the details of the procedure, but one of the tasks given to us was to make sure that we're performing the background checks in a timely manner. And since the Tribal Law and Order Act was passed, we have adopted new policies and procedures, and we are doing background checks. I was told that we've done, since the Act came into law, about 35 of those we're able to do on a timely manner. But in terms of, actually the specific processes, I think I would have to defer to someone else like Darren Cruzan to respond to your question.
Okay. Maybe if we could get that for the record, but it seems to me that some of the delays could be eliminated if there was some basic pre-screening that was done, maybe at the job fair sometime prior to the conditional offer of a job. And so I'm wondering maybe if some of those ideas have been considered, and so you might furnish that for the record too.
Senator, in response, we will continue to look for opportunities to speed up the process, but I think the numbers show that we have improved greatly the hiring. I have some figures. Like in 2007, we had an increase of 7 in personnel. I'm talking about corrections and law enforcement officers. In 2008, 4, so 7 and 4. But since 2009, we increased by 39, and then in 2010 by 52, and then by thus far in 2011, 31. So we're moving forward, and law enforcement officers on the ground, out there in the streets and in the communities, are very important, and we've had like a 20% increase. And of course, I have to express appreciation to the Congress for providing the appropriations for us to move forward in this area of hiring. But even with the money, when I first came in, we were struggling with getting people selected through the background process and trained. But we've made some very significant advances in that regard, and we will continue to look for ways to improve.
Good. Sounds like you're heading in the right direction anyway. Tribal Law and Order Act included a provision increasing the maximum hiring age from 37 to 47. Has that been implemented?
As far as I know, yes. And that is something that we identified was needed because of the recent history prior to 2009 where we were struggling to get people in there.
I'm going to direct this to Mr. Pirelli quickly here, if I might, but the Tribal Law and Order Act also included a provision that would allow magistrates to hold trials and other court proceedings in tribal courtrooms as opposed to federal courts. Has that been implemented?
Well, I think, and that's principally in the judiciary's bailiwick. We've been encouraging courts across the country to do this, whether it's in tribal courts or to move magistrates closer to reservations. You know, we have reservations in this country that are the size of states with less than 10 police officers patrolling at any one time. If 2 of them have to go testify in federal court a couple of hundred miles from the reservation, that's an enormous impact on their ability to protect public safety. So I don't think I will try and find out the answer to you about how many instances or when that has happened, but I think it is important for us to, where we can, bring the courthouse closer to the reservation in many communities across the country.
And that was the intent of that provision. So thank you. I see my time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator.